What is this cash flowing per month? What's the income? What's this look like?
On an annualized basis, $350,000 net after everything. So that's all included. If you have to do a little more work, spend the time up front to do the work, build a good product in an area that has high demand and good tenants, and your risk is dramatically lower. And your odds of being successful are not only higher, but the amount of success you'll have is way, way more. So we filled up the facility in less than 3 months, totally filled, occupied, and we started raising rents. We were the only person in a 5-mile radius that had that product type. So we got 100% of that demand, 100% of it. What's up, guys? We are here at a storage facility that I developed, and we are going through this development and giving you the numbers. So what did it look like? How did we get in? How much did it cost? How much does it cash flow? And everything in between. Now, we've done this one, which is a stabilized facility that we have owned, and we also have other developments that we have done and are currently doing. So we want to kind of look at this and how you approach a development. What does that look like? And how does it play out? Like, what did the actual numbers turn out? What were surprises? What should we be looking for? And what we would do differently or are doing differently today. That sound good, George?
Yeah. And to mix this up for everybody, we're gonna flip the script, and instead of AJ interviewing a guest, I'm gonna be the one asking AJ questions, so we can walk through these numbers and help you guys learn more about development, what it can look like, and what you're working on today with developments.
Let's do it.
All right. So before we go into anything else, I know people are always going to want to know the financials for this. So let's, what is this cash flowing per month, or what's the income? What's this look like?
So there's lots of things that go into developments, and there's lots of ways that you can break down. Like, some people look at just building cost, right? There's lots of ways. So just to start the podcast off, an overlook at where everything sits. That's all in numbers. So we built this, it's 74,000 net rentable square feet. And we built this for about 4, maybe 4.5, right in there, just over $4.3 million. It's 74,000 net rentable. We have outdoor storage. It's kind of like a tiered down level, like a drive up below, like a daylight basement kind of thing. And that underneath it, there's climate control. Now, climate control only makes up like 15% of it, but there's a lot of large drive up units. So we're actually in the front part right now, the office. At the time, the goal was that we were going to bring a high end, more of that first tier market at the time, like high end storage, which didn't exist in a lot of other markets. So we were like, we're going to bring that to give a higher end kind of offering. Right now, the facility, as far as we look at numbers and cash flow, everything goes, I've got a bunch of notes down we took before so I could really walk through this. We'll dive more into the numbers and everything, but to just where we're at. We're looking at around net operating income. It's currently, we're just leaving the slow season. So January, February, and even March are the slow season. April, May, June, July is where we do most of our business. But even coming out of that, gross income is anywhere between 65 to 64 in February to 70,000 a month. We'll have a few months where that'll go higher than that, because as you get new people in, you actually boost not only the amount of renters and rent, you get like your sign up fees, you get all of that kind of stuff. So the moving or that churn hits that revenue a lot higher.
Right.
And so when you're in the slow season, it's like people aren't moving really out, they're not really moving in, kind of settles in. So we look at right around that 64 to 70,000, 64 at the low end a month.
And so that's 64, basically that's 64,000 a month, and that's the low part. You expect it to get better. 70,000 square feet. And then, so what does it take to, to manage that? What's the expenses look like?
On this facility, our operating expenses right now are running about $19,000, $20,000 a month.
Okay.
Now, this can vary a lot by location. And, some of the big things is, do you have people working full time? Do you have, what county are you in? What does the taxes look like? That can be very, very different. And insurance, there's a lot of areas that have high insurance costs. So those expense ratios per site can vary. This site, we're right about, for our operating expenses, $19,000 to $20,000 a month. This is also a low CapEx facility because it was built, it's brand new, and we've maintained it. So that's just our operating main expenses. So our net operating income is around $50,000 to $55,000 a month.
Okay, so then we have the revenue at $64,000. You said the expenses was $19,000. So now your NOI is a little over 50, and then so
45 off the low month. Okay. That's like our base, and then the net operating income because the expenses are paid. So through the rest of the year, you have December, January, and February. Those 3 months, the bottom of the trough.
Yeah.
Then the seasonality, it kind of comes up. That everything from here obviously goes to net income because all the bases are covered. So we'll see an exaggerated increase on the net income because every penny from there on out. So all that increase to that gross income we're talking about, and then it tapers off and goes back down the fall. So that's when you average it out. Net operating income at the lowest is just over $45,000.
Got it. Okay. So then if that gets us to the NOI, and then the last piece is just the debt payments and then the cash flow. What does it look like as far as, profit?
Yeah, so our debt service on this, we've adjusted. So when we originally built it, we financed it, we improved it, and like a year and a half later, maybe 2 years, about a year and a half, we refinanced, pulled all our money and profits out. And at that new finance rate, it's roughly $23,000 a month. So on an annualized basis, $350,000 net, right, around. After everything.
Right.
So that's all included. Now, this is also, we're at our low end of occupancy. And so we really know throughout a year on a development or any facility, once you get to like July, you kind of know where the rest of your year is going to sit. Look, because you went through the busy season, so you got the highs. And so we really look forward now as we're moving in, off that low occupancy coming out of it, how much are we going to go up? And then that ties into how much rate increases we can give. So it's a big compounding effect on revenue. And right now, this facility and all our facilities are in the mix of it. So you're advertising, you're doing everything you can, you're looking at delinquencies, you're churning them over. It's the Super Bowl of the year.
Yeah. So I think this is cool for people to be able to see the end result of a stabilized development that's now, bringing in $350,000 in cash flow. And I think we're in here right now. We're in Idaho, and this is like, you could throw a party in here. It's so nice. So I think, but for a lot of people, when they're first thinking of development, it's scary. And so they're like, okay, great, I can see the end result of this, but what is it? Maybe let's talk about some of the journey to getting there. So I know now that we've seen this all the way through, and even though this is stabilized, you're still developing today. So you're still doing it. And you have other projects that are not fully stabilized in doing this. So maybe talk about just like, where were you in your journey when you decided to develop this? Like how much storage had you already done, and what did that look like? Everybody,
when they come into investing, everybody's taking things from a different approach based upon their skills, their resources, knowledge. I did nothing in development or real estate or anything like that. So no experience, not even handy. Like I couldn't build anything. And so for us, our main business model was buying underperforming assets and turning them around through operations. And so we've been doing that for 10 years.
Oh, okay.
So we already had probably 11 facilities.
And this was your first development?
And this was our first development. And when we came at this one, we developed it very differently than how people develop real estate. Mm-hmm. Architects and a lot of other people were like, you're kind of like, this isn't how you do it, right? You're doing it wrong. But we built something that was catered around a certain type of, we call them, customers or clients that are our tenants. But we actually identified in this market who we wanted to be our renters, and not all are the same. You have renters that pay wildly different prices for the same type of unit, depending on where they live, what they need, on and on and on. And so we had our customer in mind when we developed it, and we'd taken that from those experiences. So we knew where those outlies laid, And my competitive advantage wasn't the fact that I understood development or real estate or anything else like that.
But you knew your customer.
But I knew our customer and I knew our product and how it worked. So we built the facility based upon operational things and what the customers in that market needed.
Because I imagine someone seeing this was like, you guys are putting way too much money into making this look nice.
Oh, yeah. And especially at the time. I mean, at the time, there was no, in the state, there was no storage facilities that were anything remotely close to this kind of quality. Yeah. It was, maybe there's a little office kind of thing, but you drive up and one gate, it was not meant to be retail, show, front facing, main road. It was off the side kind of stuff. So it was very different.
So when you talk about how you knew your customer, how does someone, if they're thinking about developing, how do they know that there's a customer like that here? Like, how do you know, like, hey, there's customers that I know will pay for a first-class looking facility?
So there's a few things. And once again, it really depends on, people approach real estate and storage in a real estate more of a mode, where it's like, oh, how much is the land or the building cost, right? And a lot of that, I think, is wildly backwards. In fact, most people, 90+% of everyone that we talk to about development, they start out saying, I know this piece of land that I can get for cheap, or I can build, at this cost in this market, or I know, they talk real estate stuff. Yeah. And I immediately have to say, okay, but is there demand? What kind of demand is there? Who are the customers, right? Because this gets a little more complicated in storage. Let's take a traditional multifamily. All right, you have 2 bedrooms, 1 bath. Well, depending on where it is and the quality, all of them will roughly be the same, right? It's like this is the market price. Take a single family home. Well, okay, let's look it up, and that's the market price for that asset. And there may be 3 different types. Maybe you have 3 bedrooms, 2 bathrooms. Maybe you have a 1 bedroom, 1 bathroom, right? But it's kind of limited. This is what it is. This is the quality. This is the location. In a storage facility, you can have up to, 15, 18, 20 different types of units. And that can be everywhere from climate controlled 5x5s to 30x30 huge garage door drive-ups and pull-throughs for contractors. So you can have one that is record storage, like for companies that do records, other one that's a closet for somebody holding ski stuff.
Right.
Another one, if somebody's parking an old car in. Other one's drive-through business. You have RVs, you have your traditional storage, you have covered. And the thing is, all of them are different people completely.
Yeah.
And so the supply and the demand at a facility, if I take a facility that has, let's say, 70% occupancy, so that means, they have 30% vacancy. That 30% vacancy will almost always be in 2 products. Right. Meaning 80% of the vacancy is located in just 2 products, units being products. Right. So I think about it, customer, product, right? So think about that. You have 15, 16 units, and almost all your vacancy is in just 2 products.
Yeah.
That can show you how, if you get that wrong, how severely, where you may be looking at it, and there may be demand. You may have demand, and you built something, and then your demand is lower because of the individual type of units. Now you go even further with that. Depending on the area that you're in, somebody may pay or want to pay 50 cents a square foot a month, where another type of product or unit in that same area, somebody, or just a different customer, may pay $2 a square foot a month. The difference between that discount and that higher end and where people are, how much they make, what they're using it for, is very large.
It's so interesting hearing you say that, because even just in my conversations, that if someone's asking me about development, the only question they ever want to know is what cost per square foot.
What cost per square foot?
That's
exactly.
It.
And I'm like, well, I don't know. Are you developing in an area and your tenants, are they going to pay you 50 cents a square foot or $2 a square foot?
Yeah.
Because there's developments that you can develop and build at, okay, let's take today, $80 a square foot for a drive-up storage that's decent. It's not gravel, it's paved, but it's nothing high-end or fancy. Or then you could be building a nice multi-story, climate-controlled in a bigger market they cost you $200+ a square foot.
Right.
I've seen people buy land at times, like in Scottsdale, where the land itself per square foot is what other people were building at. Their entire projects square foot cost were in rural markets. So there is a range, of course. If you're looking $80 to $120 a square foot today is where you're going to see the bulk of it. You can obviously build cheaper. So some people, that is their competitive advantage. I own the contracting company, I own everything, so I can build cheaper. The problem is, though, that's marginal compared to the revenue side.
Right.
So if your competitive advantage means you can save $10 a square foot, you're at $70 instead of $80 a square foot, that's a big advantage.
Yeah.
But it's not if the person that's developing at $80 a square foot can get $2 a square foot in rent a month and you can only get 50 cents.
Right.
That competitive advantage is not only meaningless, right? You should always spend a higher cost. That other person can build at 150,
right,
where you can't even build at 80 and make a profit. So that's where that gets complicated. So generally speaking, it's a two-sided thing, but that's where people miss, like we talked about. They're so focused on the cost, not the revenue, and they grossly overestimate or underestimate the revenue because they're just calculating as a whole. They're not looking at those individual products. So with this project here, we went and we identified in our area, it was like a 5-mile radius, there was entire subsets of unit products that the competitors didn't even have. They weren't even there.
Right.
Then there were other types of units that weren't there in the market, and that's because people said, nobody wants those. People won't pay $600 for an RV enclosed with power, lights, everything else. And you have to remember, this isn't today, this was a while ago. But when we looked at the market in a 5-mile radius, we go, I looked and I said, how many RVs over $250,000 are selling in this market? A lot.
Yeah.
So all of a sudden I'm sitting here going, I know there's people that have $500,000 RVs. They're selling them. They have them out here. And there's whole entire HOAs and stuff that don't allow people to park RVs. $600 to take care of a $500,000 RV isn't crazy, right? That customer is different. Also, then we said, who is the customer that has a $500,000 RV? Well, their income is very large.
Right.
So I don't want the whole market. I had whatever it is, 20 of these. In a 5-mile radius, none of them exist. So we went and measured and we looked and we said that population is thousands. We can actually see who's buying. We can see incomes, right? And so we built for them, not what the competitors were building and what necessarily they had high occupancy or not. So 2 of our product selections at this location in our 5-mile radius at the time, they didn't even have. And those were the really high-end products that we would sell for a lot. The reason being is people said, and it was just this old adage where this is storage. It was literally 50, 40 cents a square foot. It was in the, a lot of them didn't even feel safe.
Yeah.
They weren't high quality, but they said that this is storage. People don't want to pay a lot. Even our thesis was the opposite of that. We said there's a whole segment of the storage market that wants to pay higher end for security, quality, that is close, convenient, that they can use, but mainly too that they feel protected. 64% of the buying decision is made by a female, not a male. Right. So we catered the building to the female customer. We had it very lit up. And we found that there's the smell, the quality, the inside, the aesthetic, how lit it is, the security. That matters so much more to the female customer than the male. It's actually wild. Like the males really didn't care a whole lot about that when they were making the buying decision.
Right.
They looked for functionality. Can I get my big truck in, everything else? Can I, if I have high-end stuff, I want to make sure it's protected, of course. But things like lighting, front office, there wasn't a perceived value as much. So we knew our customer and targeted it, and then we built to that. We're in Mississippi right now, and we're turning this storage facility around. Now, lots of people are out trying to buy facilities, small ones that range everywhere from $300,000 to $4 or $5 million. Now, they're worried about getting the money or having the financing. This is why we team up with Live Oak Bank, because they get this. They understand storage. In fact, we have them help us underwrite deals for our students and others because they are one of the best people in the industry when it comes to getting loans, especially small business loans. They can actually help the customers when they find the asset, understanding how much debt can I get? What's it going to look like? Not just because of the customer they're working with, but because of their knowledge base. That changes them from being a bank to being a real asset to the customer. We recommend Live Oak Bank to our students as well as others that are trying to get into the storage business. They have an in-depth knowledge of this asset class, so it's more than a bank. It's more than simply getting money. They're actually an asset and a partner to them, helping them go through all the things that they don't know and understand.
I think that's so important to have the context too of like, you had been buying storage for 10 plus years or 10 years, and then you come and do this. And so like, from a developer's mindset or other people's storage mindset, they're like, this doesn't make sense what they're doing. But you're playing a different game. You're like, we're not looking at just like building, maximizing the square footage here at the cheapest rate possible. You're like, we know that the customer, as like a super expensive RV drives by.
Yep, exactly. Right now.
But that's just like, we know that there's people out there who like, we're creating something for people that doesn't exist.
Well, two little things. So take our doors, for example. We have 2 whole rows buildings, and the doors, they're not like 10 by 20s, 10 by 30s, 10 by 10s. They're 20 by 30s. And 2, the doors are on average like a couple feet higher. Now, that is more of a specialty type thing. But when people looked at it, the other thing we did is we made our drive aisles like 30, 40% larger. That looked like waste. It's like you're wasting space that should be used for
more
rental
units.
income, right? You could get more units, and you're getting these big specialty doors that cost more. What you're raising your price per square foot, right? But what we were doing is we actually made it so, first of all, you could park in trailers and things. You had clearance to get in. The larger doors, though, were especially good for contractors. That they had things on their trailers, different things like that. They had open up, they needed to put it in. They needed higher doors and longer door space. The larger aisles made it so they could bring big trailers and even semis, and they could get through the buildings and then out. So we took the cheap customer, said get rid of him, and we went after the enterprise, the business, and our first day open, somebody came in and bought, it was 10 of all of those units, and the price that they bought 10 of those units the first day was double the market rate.
Wow.
And didn't even think about it.
Wow.
They needed it for their business and the usage and everything else. They just came in, I need all 10 of these. Boom. The whole entire side of that building, I need all of them, these big units. And so we filled up the facility in less than 3 months.
Wow.
Totally filled, occupied, and we started raising rents. We had a line out the door, which was wild. I'd never seen a storage facility that had a line out the door to rent
it's
storage units. I got a call literally, it was a Friday night. My manager's like flipping out, like, I need help now. And I'm like, what's going on? It's supposed to be closed. So I literally come down here and there's a line, 6 o'clock at night out the door. And it actually makes logical sense. We're the only one with those products.
Yeah.
Everybody knew and could see it. It stood out. It was desirable, right? So we got out of our market and the competitors, we didn't have any. We were the only person in a 5-mile radius that had that product type. So we got 100% of that demand, 100% of it. So everybody had to come to us that wanted those products. And that is the difference where in that market, we could get double the rate per square foot that everybody else was getting or could. And we had an abnormal amount of demand because when you looked at supply, they were all competing over the same customer, the same type of unit. So the supply was really large. It was like 15 square feet per capita. But when you looked at our supply, 50% of our storage facility, there was no competitors.
Right.
So there was no square feet per capita at all. That meant obviously supply and demand, the economics of it, the people that wanted it and needed it the most were willing to pay really high amounts. And it meant that since we were the only one in town, everybody had to come to use us. So then it actually created almost like a type of like a frenzy where we're like, listen, you either get it now or you don't get it. I know we just opened up, but that guy just took half that building, like the entire building. So that it was like self-reinforcing.
So we talked through the financials, we talked through this property, and we've laid the foundation of like what goes into development. And now we come to today, and you're still developing today.
Yes.
What's still the same about development that you've been able to use to build your knowledge for what you're looking for, and what's changed? What's different?
Yeah, so the economics that we look for, that focus on customer quality, who it is, that revenue portion, that is still the same in the way we go about it. What is different is a lot of these things now are more known. So first and foremost, we are developers that are owner-operators. This is important to know. We are developing to own and operate, not to flip, not to sell. A large portion of developers in the marketplace, all they're doing is developing to sell it. That's what developers do, right? To make money. Now, what has happened is when we had the boom time of storage, development was booming. It was on a frenzy because developers could come, they could develop, then they could sell it before it was even full, as if it was at a low cap rate, making a lot of value. We built this for $4 million. Today, it's worth somewhere between 13 to 15 million. We actually have a written offer at that. So that's how we even know that. So even the applied cap rate, you have 5 cap, it's 13 is 6 cap, it's 12 or whatever it is, but we have an actual offer on the table for that. Mm-hmm. So when you look at that, saying, if I could develop that at 4, at the time, you couldn't get that high because rents weren't high, but it doesn't matter. Let's say you could have gotten 8, which we could have, because we filled up. And once it was stabilized, that metric changes. Now we have revenue producing. So we could have sold it to 8. So then I put $1.5 million into it. I could have made $4 million in 2 years, right? So that's why developers do it. They're like, I can put this in. A lot of them even borrow the money. So they're putting nothing in,
right?
And then they're flipping it, right? And making all of this money. Now, as interest rates rose, those cap rates, that value, that started to get hit. But what really got hit was risk. So if it wasn't stabilized, full, things like that, nobody was buying what are called CO deals. That just died. That market died. That means developers that were trying to flip these assets, they had no one to exit.
So they're just stuck with them.
They're stuck. It was like, oh, shoot. Okay, so development has now started to shrink. But up until that point, there was a 4-year run, more than that. We had a 6-year run, but there was a 4-year time where the development per year was more by like 50% than any of the next high previously in the last cycle, like before 2008 and 9. They were developing at rates that had never been seen. They were developing what 5 years worth of development prior to 2008 was in a year. Wild.
Because they could just develop and someone would buy it and they would just make a great profit.
They'd make a great profit. And it was a sustainable, good cash flow, and demand was rising. So they were doing that, and these things were filling up, right? Demand was rising, interest rates were going low, people were buying, the housing market was booming, and storage facilities made a lot of money. That changed though a lot. So then all of a sudden people wanted higher end customers, they started building higher quality, and that market began to get saturated. Mm-hmm. So today, we still look for all of the same things, but there's not going to be markets that are big markets or second-tier markets like this one was, that you can find big holes or gaps in it. So you just need to look, and you got to be a lot more careful about it.
Right.
Overall demand. The storage facility industry has been on a 2-year lows off those highs. Now it's turning around now. So the assets that we just opened up 2 just this year. We're on in the spring. They're filling up faster than we projected them to. They're doing very well. But we're very specific because we don't just develop anywhere. So that comes after huge amounts of work to try to understand supply and demand. And we want disproportionate amount of demand. Also, in markets that you could have developed at low revenue numbers, you can't because the price per square foot has gone up so much. With inflation, with everything else that's gone on, if you look back, you could have developed a storage facility for $30, $40 a square foot, right? Now, for the same quality that cost you $38 a square foot, it's now $95. So your revenue then associated with that has to be high. And if you want to do high-end quality that maybe would have cost you $40 or $50, it's $150 or more. So we don't look at markets that we can't achieve a rental rate of $150 or lower a month, because just at where building costs are, everything else, it's like that won't make sense. That actually eliminates a lot of markets in the United States.
Yeah.
So what we've seen now is the fundamentals of how we develop and build, yes. What we say, though, is don't expect the market to make you. So we don't expect the market to bail us out. And by that, I mean, I don't expect it to have a buyer that's just going to pay me a huge amount. I don't expect cap rates to go down. I don't expect a quick sell. I don't expect it to just be so busy. Like, we have to work. We have to earn it. We have to be a good operator. So we're buying to operate in markets that have excess demand. And we know there's a kind of a plateau for quality at that price point where, in order to get anything decent quality, and by decent quality, I'm just talking about paved roads, right? Good product, all that kind of stuff.
Yeah, built to last.
Yeah, built to last. It costs a lot. So that spread, where instead of having rates just keep going up and occupancy going up, but price per square foot of development wasn't going up, that was a big windfall. Now we have really high prices per square foot to develop, and rates aren't just escalating, and we don't expect them to. I'm not building, and we don't project in our building, in 3 years from now, rates, a rate for a 10 by 10 was $100. It'll be $110. We don't do that.
Right.
We actually look 3-4 years out with no rate increase on market rates. And if it doesn't work, we don't do it. We don't expect the market to make us.
Right. Could you talk a bit more about that timeline? Because as you're talking through this, I'm like, okay, I understand the concept of looking at demand, seeing what the customers are doing, building to fit the customer. And I can understand the financials that you're talking through, but I imagine for someone getting started, they're like, okay, I have this piece, there's this piece of land that, and I think there's a good market for it, but how long is it going to take me to develop? Once it opens, how long is it going to take me to fill up? When am I actually going to see money coming back to me that I put into this?
Yeah. Developments are long-term games. You are creating equity. There's a difference, obviously, between material and ground, a finished product, and then a finished cash flowing asset that is being sold as an investment. Right. Wildly different. When you look at the time frame that it takes to, first of all, just make it into something, an actual building, structures, right? That you have to first go on the approval list. So you got to deal with the cities, everything else. Depending on the location, if it's not approved for that use, that could be a year or two. And then the actual development, that can be 6 months, or now 8 months to a year and a half. Mm-hmm. That's going to widely depend on the county, the city, what you have to do to get it passed, restrictions, and then availability of workers, all of that. That's going to, but there's no way that we would not say, if I have no approvals, it's just bare ground, I got to go get everything changed, I got to get it permitted, I got to do all this, I got to get sewer there, everything else. I mean, this is a 3-year thing. Now, if you already have the ground approved, everything's done, and you're buying it as, I can build storage here, and then you want to build storage, a year and a half. Now, fill up, we always put 3 years.
Got it.
Now, I've only ever stabilized occupancy at 80+% in under a year. That is not normal, though.
And you don't
And
underwrite.
I would never underwrite, never plan for that. If anything, I would say that was lucky because of market conditions and timing. So we underwrite, financially plan for 3 years, and you should, because the bank's going to make you do that anyways.
Right.
If it happens sooner than that, congratulations. That's awesome.
Yeah.
But to plan on that, that's really bad. The reason being is you have operational expenses that if you're not full and if you don't have renters, they're not paying. So you actually have to put money to operate the asset until it fills up. So if you planned on a year and it takes you 3, now you're a year and a half short of operational expense.
Yeah.
And that's a mistake we see a lot. In fact, we've actually seen people that give feasibility studies that you have to give for banks that talk, a feasibility study tells, is this market good? If you're developing, how much can you fill it up, right? We do this for customers. You pay for it, and it's a whole thing on demand. Most banks will require it, right? They need to see, is this project feasible or not? And especially during the height, we were seeing people give customers back feasibility studies that were filling up a facility, with 600 units in 8 months.
Wow.
That's very dangerous. Market fluctuations, especially when it comes to demand or occupancy, can be very short-lived. And it can be due to things outside of core normal demand. So if you're planning on a really amazing project, that's good. Plan on it. You know, it will be. But do not plan on filling up an asset, stabilizing it, not needing money to go through the time, because there's things that can affect you and that asset that have nothing to do with that moment or today. It's a classic mistake that I see developers or people developing making. They believe in the market so much they're developing in. That's why they're developing it, that they assume that what's today and what has been in the past will continue over multiple years. You're talking about from the time you get bare land to the time it's open to the time you fill up. I mean, what, 3 to 5 years?
Yeah, that's what I was thinking. That's my understanding of how you were going
Yeah.
through it is like, but if you have a raw piece of dirt, like you should not be thinking that it's going to be stabilized till at least 5 years. And then like you're coming back here, you're like, this filled up in 3 months, but that's not how you.
Yeah, that's wild. I've never seen anything like that. So development's capital intensive. It costs more and takes more than we all think. And the reason being is there's all of these outside things that we can't control. And when you're developing, you will find things and there will be problems that you could have never predicted or guessed at the first. And that can put you in financial problems that were 100% avoidable and should have been. It is the difference of dealing too with professionals that aren't doing it cheap, but instead they have expertise in it. We see people in development that approach it like real estate and they go the cheap route. There was a large facility on the freeway in this market where we built this. They built it, it cost them $5-6 million, but they were like, we're gonna do it all ourselves kind of thing. They didn't put lips going up into it, into the things, so they had water issues, little things that actually most people would think isn't a big deal. And then they couldn't even sell the facility because nobody would buy it because they're like, these issues aren't going to go away.
Right.
Huge. This was a massive facility. This was like 1,000 units. And if they would have spent a little more and gone with experts, the value they would have created, you're talking about a facility that could have been, that they built for probably around the same price, 4 or 5 million. If they would have done it right, it may have cost 6 million. So they're sitting here going, we're saving $1 million. Then they went to sell it and they couldn't sell it. I think they ended up, it was finally, and this was during the heat of the market. This was when people were buying and paying, and not now. They ended up getting down to 8 million. I think they took it off the market. Whereas if they would have gone with the experts and the people that actually knew what they were doing, paid a little more money for just a little better quality, that would have been worth $15 million. This was a massive facility right on the freeway exit. What they lost to save that $1 million was a fortune, literally.
I think a lesson for people listening to this is like, if you're going to develop, invest more upfront because it's going to pay off in the long run. It's going to tie into your exit strategy. And if you just go for cheap development, you're going to attract cheap customers and you're just going to be racing to the bottom.
Yep. And there's two sides of development. You have cash flow,
right,
and then you have equity. When people go cheap, they're usually trying to adjust for the revenue that's achievable in that market. That is a very dangerous game to play because if the revenue is only at a certain point, you can't force there to be more. And if you end up having to pay more, if things go wrong or it takes longer, and you can't achieve a good profit margin because of those low income, right, you're stuck.
Right.
So I would rather be in a market that is more forgiving to mistakes because of the higher rents. So I do have runway. Like in a lot of markets, it's actually better the fact that you have to spend a ton of money to develop the facility. That's actually safer.
Right.
The reason being is there's more demand and the customers will pay a lot more money. So it's actually can be much safer to spend more money on a development than go cheap. Once again, it's not like normal real estate. This stuff really matters in a market or in a climate where costs escalate. We saw this a lot, and the reason why I'm harping on it and bringing it up is we had inflation. Somebody that started a development in a time when we had massive inflation, their cost went up 30% on $5 million, and they were sitting here going, that was going to be tight as it was. Then they expected market rents, the rents for units to go up. They expected occupancy to go up. But because of the inflation, they rose interest rates, which slowed the housing market down. So occupancy went down and rates went down. There wasn't enough room there to actually adjust for both increase in cost and lower. So I prefer areas that I can be wrong. I call this my margin of stupidity. I need a margin where I can be stupid or simply just not know what's going on,
right.
and I'm still okay. And that usually doesn't exist, or people usually look at that and say, I'm going to do that by making it cheaper. I'm not going to spend as much money, because they equate the amount of money with the amount of risk. If there's one thing you take away from this, the amount of money you spend does not equate to the amount of risk you take on. You can spend $100 million and you have less risk than somebody that spends $100,000, because the risk is equivalent to the danger or how much you could lose. At the end of the day, if you go to zero, you go to zero, right? But the point being is, cheap doesn't mean it's safer. You may say it's an exposure of money that I could lose. So instead of losing 100, I would lose 200. Yes, but that's not what odds mean. That's not how it works. You can actually improve your odds. So don't fall into the trap where it's safer by going cheaper, especially in this last run. That actually proved to be completely wrong. I believe it's almost always wrong. But don't also get confused that I'm saying spending money that's not what I'm talking about.
Right.
What I mean is, when you decide your location, generally speaking, if it's predicated on cost, you are going to get worse locations where you have lower paying customers, and it's also going to be more saturated because the barriers of entry are lower. Therefore, you actually have lower demand. Rents can't increase because of lower demand. So whatever you save on is completely overshadowed by the fact that you don't have demand, you can't charge prices, and you can't collect that revenue. That is typical when we see. Now, that doesn't mean in that market you spend twice as much and it's going to be better. No,
right.
That's not what I'm talking about here. That just makes it twice the problem because the odds didn't change, right? So now you're just exposing more. Instead, look at areas that you can get good rental rates, that if you have tariffs come in and steel prices go up, that market can support increases in cost because the renters are willing to pay, that you can shoulder that. Be in markets that have demand. There's not oversupply. Now, a lot of times that means it's harder to build there, meaning you got to work with the city more. You got to do a little more work, right? It may not be as quick as a city that goes, I don't care, just build wherever you want.
Right.
Well, that means lower barriers of entry and everybody's building. So if you have to do a little more work, spend the time up front to do the work, build a good product in an area that has high demand and good tenants and good paying, and your risk is dramatically lower. And your odds of being successful are not only higher, but the amount of success you'll have is way, way more. And the going cheap model is like a lot. That's what a lot of people are talking about today.
Yeah.
And that is not only not played out. There's a cap on it because of inflation. There's only so cheap you can go.
Right.
And we're not seeing an adjustment that makes up for that. You still have to shoulder that increased cost over the last 5 years.
So AJ, I think my last question here, and we've gone through this deal, we've gone through advice for people going through this, we've gone through your experience. Is there anything about this deal or another development, or maybe a property that you almost bought and didn't, but like anything that you're like, what I know now, I wish I knew back then? You know,
a lot.
That someone else is like, oh wow, I don't have to make that same mistake,
The cost thing, that's a primary example. The making sure that just because somebody is an expert in development, just because they're a good architect, just because you know them, they're your friend, does not mean they know what they're doing in storage. People oversimplify storage because they believe it's just so simple. Every time that I hear somebody that's in multifamily go, I do multifamily, so this is going to be easy. I'm like, I am not touching anything you invested, right? Because it is not a matter of it being easier because it's $10 or not. It's a matter of understanding an asset that is wildly different and the utilization of the asset and customers. That's why the successful storage developers that I see, that don't get hit in cycles or anything, they're operators, they're owners, because they understand how all of this works. Instead, if you don't go with the experts, they're going to put products out on the market that people don't really want. You're not measuring demand. And then you're stuck with an asset that if you would have just known and had experts, they would have given you a different product selection. Square foot, your revenue would have been higher, your expenses would have been lower, and you would have had a good job. So what you don't know, make up for with people that do. Another thing, they are not separate. Traditionally, I see developers, and this is kind of how I did it too, was I went to an architect, then I went to a developer, then I went to found the land, and then I went to a storage operator, and then they were all siloed out. But at the end of the day, the operations of this asset, how much it's going to cost and how you're going to do it, and the architect building it, these are not separate things. They're the same. Unit selection, everything else. The builder, how you build it, how it looks, how it works, right? And so there's just this pass on. Like, well, the architect did this, now pass it on, now you build it. And what I think is the premier way to do it, the right way to do it, you have all of these people at conception discussing, talking about, here's the end result. We have feasibility studies done. Here's the market rates that we're looking at. Here's what we are wanting to do. The architect will optimize for space.
Right.
The builder will optimize for cost, space, things like that. They're not optimizing for customers.
The architect wasn't telling you to make the drive aisles bigger.
Nope. The architect was saying, people were saying the opposite. Don't put this product into this. Why? Because I can build it in on my paper. I can fit more in. That doesn't mean that it's right, though.
Right.
Once again, these things aren't separate. Everybody in the room together, architect, developer, feasibility study, analysis, your land guy, whoever you need on that team, the end project is this. Here's what we're optimizing for. What are all the things that we need to share? The builder has really an experienced storage builder. They have so much that they can give to that architect and work hand in hand that they can optimize. We had one project that the architects put reinforcements for a second story that were going to cost us $900,000. The builder, who was an expert in storage, it's all they do. They've done thousands of storage facilities. We're talking hundreds of thousands of units. They came in and said, well, actually what we can do is disperse the weight, create a second floor on top of the first floor, and use the units because of how the metrics work and the disbursement. That architect had actually done storage. And yet they didn't even think of that, and they didn't know it. That saved us $900,000.
Wow.
That we were fully going in to put supports to support a second floor that we didn't need because the product that we'd already paid for would actually do it.
Wow.
Little things, but they can have a massive impact. And if we didn't have those people all in the same room, all of us talking together, those two would have never really come up with these ideas and projects. What we were able to do, we were able to build more space, we saved cost, and we did it to the market. And when our architect comes back with unit selection, we put that into underwriting and then we run through it. When we get a map layout of our units, I'm going through it. We have other people going through it. You should have an outside party, even a feasibility party, go through your unit selection. We'll run through that thing like 30 times. Nope, now we're changing these units. Let's market test it. Go out to all the facilities. Let's do all these things. We got to change these 2 units, right? These are your products. These are what you sell. And people act like it's the side product of it. Like it's like, oh, okay, well how many 10 by 10s can we fit in there? Yeah, just throw in 20 10 by 10s. And I'm like, that's your product. And you can't really change it that easily when it's done. The heart of your time should be spent supply demand first, getting the team together all on one project, and then unit selection and figuring out, how can we optimize these products in this market and tying that in with the experts, the architect, the developer that aren't you, and then all working together towards that project end, to that end goal.
My mind's spinning. I've learned a ton. And so this has been awesome. I think for me, development is a scary topic for a lot of people. And I think we were able to break it down. And I think being able to see, we're here at the end result of it, but we also were able to spend today talking about what it looks like from the beginning all the way through. And I think for anyone listening to this, I know how I feel. I'm like, this actually helps my mind grasp all of this in a much better way. So AJ.
You got to look at the big picture.
Yeah.
It can be a lot, but once you see the connection and understand it, And two, once again, you're not doing it alone. When we developed this one and all our other ones, we've done conversions, ground up. We've done, we're talking office buildings to bankrupt super Kmarts, right? Everything in between, ground up in first tier markets, second tier markets, third tier markets, expansions. I don't know anything about developing. Nothing. Right? I don't know anything about developing. I don't need to. I have experts. They tell me and we work together. I'm not an architect. I can't do those things. You don't need to. And the key of the success will be the quality of the people that you put around you to do that project, that are building and optimizing for a certain thing like cash flow, returns, market saturation, all that kind of stuff. When you're optimizing for low cost, you miss the meat.
AJ, I appreciate you letting me take over this podcast and interview.
Thanks for taking over my podcast, George. Appreciate it. Hope that was helpful, everybody. So put in the comments more questions about developing. We respond to them, we ask them, and we can do that in short form, long form. It's a big topic. We actually have Forge, who is the developer, a storage facility developer. They're one of the largest in the world. They've developed thousands of storage facilities across the United States. We have them coming up, so please put your questions in the comments because we will ask them. And we're going to talk a lot about the changes and especially with tariffs. So make sure your questions are in here, guys, and we'll ask the experts and what they're seeing and doing today.